So hello everyone, welcome to our next Human Discussions collections. I'm so excited to have Claire Cherry from True Global with us. We always were very adamant that you need to have a truly amazing brand, incredible strategies to really kind of get that proper investment. And it's a hard work, everyone knows that. But that's why I wanted to really speak to Claire because she's the guru in investment. She works for one of the most amazing retail investment brands and companies. So I really wanted to pick her brain. So welcome, Claire. Thank you so much for coming on these discussions.
Fantastic to be here, and thanks for hosting, Kate. Yeah, as Kate said, I work for True, which is a venture capital fund. So broadly, we have a pool of money that we can invest in innovative brands and businesses to help them scale and grow. For me, obviously, my ambition is to find the next Nike, Depop, or Glossier. And yeah, I've been in investing for almost 10 years now, and absolutely love kind of the diversity and the variety that you see day in, day out in meeting these entrepreneurs and scale up businesses.
So basically, no pressure, everyone. Yeah, you just kind of need to be this amazing, super innovative. No, come on. I'm like, yes, you have amazing and super innovative brands, but you obviously invest both in B2C and B2B brands. But everything is still very centered on retail. So what are you specifically kind of looking for over the next few years? Like any kind of, goal that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I guess obviously the consumer and retail landscape has gone through a lot of change over, even the last couple of years, aside from the last 5 to 10. And for us as a fund, we were always investing in digitally focused businesses, primarily because it gives you access to a customer base and feedback loops that you can't necessarily have through retail partners. And I think that for us over the coming period, it probably takes that one step forward. And certainly on the B2B side, where we're looking at technologies and services that sell into large retailers or large brands, it is about marrying that online and offline experience. How can you give the customer an efficient, personalized, and better experience than they've seen previously or than your competitors are giving them? So a lot of it comes down to whether it be loyalty, returns, kind of in-store to online purchase. All of those facets, I'd say, are particularly interesting for us. Obviously, community has been kind of at the heart of what we do, both from a B2B and from a D2C perspective. And that's not going anywhere. I think for us, we have seen a proliferation of brands really focusing on community, but again, it's about having a genuine and true connection to your customers and understanding who they are, whether that be a small pool, medium-sized or large. I think for us that still is the core to all businesses and understanding that customer base. And obviously from the direct to consumer side, you can't avoid the charge towards sustainability, which is long overdue, I guess, in this market particularly. We can't get away from the fact that ultimately in the consumer industry, you are always in the business of producing items. So therefore, if you can do that in a more transparent, more environmentally friendly way, I do think that will become commonplace. So for us, it's not necessarily, a core differentiator now, but it's a core requirement because it will become something that consumers expect, I would say, even in 12, 18 months, if not already.
I love when you said it's not a core differentiator, but a core requirement. Oh my goodness, this is perfect. Because my belief, as you already know, but maybe not everyone from the audience knows, is sustainability should be just basically a default setting in any kind of business strategy. Forget about brand strategy. It is not a piece of communication, in something that is going to get you noticed. Yes, okay, it still kind of gets those customers, but eventually every brand will have to be sustainable. There's no question about it. So it will stop being eventually that differentiator. So I love that you kind of mentioned that. Obviously, you mentioned also the communities. I love that element because, again, my view already. This is kind of a strong differentiator right now for brands, following what we've seen with purpose or authenticity over the last few years, right? So, but when you kind of actually getting those brands on board, or even just reviewing the brands that you're thinking, because I think you said in our previous conversations that you reviewing on average about 200 brands a year and investing in like 5 max or something. It's amazing. But when you're reviewing them, like when we sort of looking at a strategy, so obviously you mentioned a lot of different elements that are so important to the strategy. But again, in our previous conversations, you always mentioned that strategy is usually not something that startups think about. And so how does it work? What you actually look at and what that element of strategy fits in? And even if the brand doesn't have it, how are you kind of finding that magic in them?
Yeah, so I think for us, finding whether there is a real and genuine customer base and community to be built around a product is really what we're trying to unlock, I guess, in the initial stages of speaking to entrepreneurs and founding teams. Because once we've established whether that's the case, you can start to unlock all of the referral and organic traffic, which is fantastic for scaling businesses efficiently. I guess I think have come to see over the years that realistically, if a founder can't define the business or the brand purpose relatively succinctly pretty immediately, and if you're not feeling that in your gut that there's something there, then don't go looking for it. I think that for me is kind of a core sign, because if you don't get that in a first meeting, then a customer isn't going to get that from the purchase journey or Instagram or however else they might come to interact with your brand. And then I guess once we've established that there is a purpose, there's a differentiation in the product or the community or the content or the way that they're accessing their customer base, then a lot of it is spending time with these entrepreneurs, with the founding teams, to ensure that you're aligned about where they want to take the brand, what metrics for them look like success. Ultimately, as I think we've discussed before, there are a lot of funding routes for businesses at the moment, of which venture capital investment is one of them, but it's not necessarily the right route or the best route unless you as an entrepreneur want to scale a business, frankly, probably a lot quicker than those that might want to take more of a lifestyle journey or just build in a different fashion. And then, obviously the beauty of direct to consumer, particularly on the branded side, is we can get website data, we can get social data, can look at all of the underlying economics to say, are people enjoying their purchase? Are they coming back? Are they repeating frequently? And what is driving that decision? Do they require new products? Do they come because you've had a good partnership or a collaboration? And I guess that whole piece gives us a visualization of what is driving the brand growth. Because I think, we've seen a wave of what I would say are unsustainable business growth, where yes, if you give enough products to enough influencers, then you will ultimately artificially have enough sales to show that you have grown 100% year on year or 500%, whatever it might be. But it's not a sustainable engine of growth. You haven't delighted your customers, so they tell 10 of their friends and they come back to you and they would pay to go to events or branded partnerships, which realistically is where we're looking to get involved. So it is, I'd say, a long process for us to get to those sorts of decisions. Typically anywhere from 6 months to 18 months of particularly knowing founders and individuals. You see a surprise, just to get to that position where you really understand the brand drivers, I think.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so you mentioned, obviously, you look at a lot of the traffic data and what's happening. Do you actually also in that process reach out to the customers or do some additional consumer research to be able to kind of even dig deeper?
Yeah, for sure. So we certainly do kind of customer surveys, customer referencing, obviously from the B2B perspective, where typically they're selling into large corporates. We would of course speak to as many of those as possible. I guess from a individual consumer perspective, obviously you're reliant on kind of sample data, but certainly it gives particularly to your point around looping back to the sustainability, you know, for example, we do look at a lot of brands where we get them to benchmark purchase decisions and whether that relates to sustainability, because obviously for now, we don't really want to see that as the majority of the decision. You know, we want it to play into a decision to purchase, but really it comes down to aesthetics, product and brand. So that is becoming more and more important for us to understand that, I guess, in a level of detail over and above what, you know, the management team might say to us.
And how good of a customer profile understanding have you seen in the brands that you're reviewing? Because like from my experience, whenever I look at brands, doesn't matter whether they're super, you know, global experienced or startup ones, it's usually the worst part of any of their kind of, you know, versions of brand books or anything along these lines.
Yeah, I think, you know, frankly, as you will know, it's really difficult to truly unlock what that represents. I would say I can probably count on one hand the number of businesses we've seen that have done it well. You know, there are a lot that try to facilitate or back solve, I would say, from a thesis about who they want their customer to be, which is relatively dangerous, versus who their customer actually is. But I think, again, for us, it's a key element that we look at to see if they have determined that, particularly from the data sources we might have looked at, you know, maybe some of the social stats or even channels. Ultimately, as you go through different demographics, different age ranges, obviously interacting with brands through different access points, and that probably tells you more than, you know, a consultant who might have come in 3 years ago to tell you who your target customer should be, but the outcome has ended up looking up slightly different to that.
And what about that sort of, you know, like we talked a lot about those aspects around brand strategy where we kind of think have like purpose or loyalty, but obviously they continuously hard to measure in numbers. And, you know, there's still obviously that, you know, that stereotype that investors are only just looking at numbers and at money. So how do you guys actually, I don't know, measure or approach some of those typically harder to quantify aspects of the brand value?
Yeah, so I guess for us as investors, it is slightly different in that we only focus on young consumer brands. So I would say in the market, we definitely have a reputation for placing more value on that than people that just look at financials. You know, I think the financials will tell you a lot, whether that be, okay, you've had, you know, 3 years of customers and nobody's ever decided to buy another product again. Obviously, I think that tells you a lot about loyalty, regardless of the product suite or where it sits. And, you know, there's some surprising ones where it might be high value purchases, furniture, kind of homewares, and you're seeing people purchase every other month, and you just have to think, okay, well, that's because they're buying into the brand and the vision for the brand. And so I would say we do look a lot at, you know, the hard metrics and financials particularly, but more to give us an understanding of what that means from the softer side. Are they over indexing on Instagram? Have they found a particular niche, you know, perhaps in text, or do they have Slack channels to get feedback before they do product development? You know, there's a lot of that ultimately will feed into very strong financials, but it is about understanding that level below, which, you know, again, it comes to that point around taking time. You can't necessarily short circuit a route to coming to that answer. So that is why we spend so much time, I guess, with, you know, everyone across the senior team that might be in the business at that point to get to the bottom of each and every angle. You know, if you look at 2020, realistically, that was probably globally challenging for supply chains, logistics, and so there would be a lot of investments that we could turn off on that basis because, frankly, the economics don't necessarily look that good. But if you take a step back and understand why that happened, it's actually, oh, demand was so strong that they couldn't fulfill, that they couldn't get their supply chain together quick enough, which is something that, yes, it's not ideal, but it's certainly not necessarily a negative on the business. You know, it's just a growth phase and growing pains that they all go through. So yeah, we try and unpack, I guess, both the softer side and the harder financials as much as we can.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so obviously you invest a lot in initially online only businesses. But as part of your kind of impact on the business, because you're not really just kind of investing in them and letting them fly, basically, you actually put a lot of effort and a lot of work with them, or also with some of your partners that you introduce to the businesses to actually make it work. And obviously there's constantly right now a question around physical retail. So what is it happening with it? And there seems to be consensus that actually still everyone loves the physical retail, and we're seeing actually a lot of brands, especially younger ones, taking advantage of a sort of more affordable access to physical premises. And how do you kind of input that sort of physical strategy into your sort of existing brands?
Yeah, I think certainly it's something that we've always encouraged for certainly our larger brands historically, because those are the ones that could afford the kind of rents that were required. As you say, now that bar has come down materially. And I think for us, a physical space, particularly an own brand physical space, gives you an ability to talk to customers, to really show what your purpose is, show your values, and get much more feedback much quicker than even people are willing to give online. I guess there is a bit of digital fatigue around reviews, incentivizing reviews, fake reviews, you know, all of that piece. Whereas in store and in person, you can't do that, and you don't feel that. So yeah, certainly I think for me, it's very exciting time, I guess, particularly for the UK high street, because I think it will end up creating a whole plethora of businesses that ultimately predominantly existed online previously, that actually have a reason for customers to purchase, customers to visit. They give that newness. You know, if I look at some of the department stores, certainly near me in London, they haven't necessarily changed or iterated probably in the decade that I've lived here, and therefore you think that certainly on a smaller scale, and as we move towards probably more of a hybrid co-working event shared space, that you know there's a real opportunity for brands to capitalize on that. And whether that is a single brand in a single unit or multiple brands, I guess, around a thesis, you know, I think all of those will end up coming to pass. But it is quite exciting. You know, I think as much as the pandemic has been obviously challenged to footfall, and you know certainly we haven't seen that return just yet, but I can't see that it won't happen in some form or other, as long as you give people a reason to visit. You know, regardless of the pandemic or not, there's certain stores that, you know, realistically they haven't given me a reason to visit in years. So I think it's been a great catalyst for everybody to have to reevaluate kind of what their value proposition is for their customers, which can only be a good thing for customers, engagement, loyalty, all of that piece.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that approach. I'm very kind of similar in that, and I love also that you mentioned department stores, which we obviously spoke about together on another panel. And I've noticed that you don't really kind of have a department store type of, or sort of multiple brand retailer type of brand on your portfolio. Is that a sort of conscious choice?
No, so I think it hasn't been historically. I guess, frankly, even the earlier ones have struggled really to get that kind of, not necessarily market fit, but I'd say community piece that we like. I'd say actually those that have had physical space that have done it outside of the UK. So, you know, as you know well, kind of the Showfields, the Hudson Yards in the US, or even Bon Marché in Paris, you know, they have built fantastic and evangelical communities that go to them for product drops, collaborations, exclusive events. But certainly from us, and I guess, you know, slightly a function of having historically a digital focus, a lot of the multi-brand retailers just haven't necessarily been able to unlock that from a digital perspective. And I think they will, but you know, from the data that we've seen, I guess it is perhaps more challenging.
Yeah, I love that you actually mentioned that you see the sort of the biggest value of those multiple brand retailers as their community. It's funny because I wrote an actual article on multiple brand communities and kind of created a special model on that and published that in Journal Brand Strategy. So it's kind of just warms my heart a little bit over here that you mentioned that.
I guess as well in, you know, the proliferation of kind of live streaming and commerce through video, in that a lot of those will ultimately become multi-brand plays, which I think will be interesting to see how that evolves in a digital setting, and whether that is, I guess, the hybrid that consumers are looking for, you know, whether it be in store and you're doing product demos more akin to, I guess, the old way of high street TV and all of the shopping channels. But I think, yeah, we're certainly seeing some interesting movement in that space, both on a single brand and a multi-brand perspective.
Yeah, it was funnily enough, that was actually my next question about the social commerce, so you've answered that. But I was also thinking very vividly about brand collaborations, because a lot of those, especially those kind of more innovative in multiple brand retailers. So I'm a big fan as well of neighborhood goods, obviously, or a sort of a much smaller boutique version of that called Perfumery in New York, or even an amazing beauty and well-being retailer, Psychology, in London. And they kind of create this sort of internal communities as well for brand founders, because inevitably, if we look into our wardrobes or if we look into our bathrooms, we never use products from a single brand. Yet we, you know, yes, we've seen some big names kind of collaborations recently. So I think Coach did one very recently with one of the sports brands, which I vividly can't remember the name of right now, because why not? But you know, obviously, and they are extremely popular, but we're not seeing so much of that, let's say, facilitated by some of those multiple brand retailers. But also kind of, you know, that leads me to a question, like how much you are sort of looking as part of the growth strategies for your businesses that you're investing in, the aspects of collaborating with some, you know, with some of the other brands, whether they are on your portfolio or not.
Yeah, I think we definitely see it as a big growth area. I guess again, it comes down to consumer fatigue, probably. I think everybody's just looking, oh, another collaboration. Does it have a point behind it, or is somebody just trying to sell me something? So we certainly only advocate those that are truly aligned and truly value additive. And I guess to that extent, it comes to a question of why you're doing it and what you're looking to achieve. And I think there are those that have done it very successfully. You know, we've seen quite a lot of digital brands perhaps go into retail stores, but with a limited edition color or collection or limited run products, which I think do work really well, and I guess give access to a customer base that maybe they wouldn't have accessed from a digital perspective. So yes, we see it as really exciting. I think you're right about multi-brand retailers. You know, I would say certainly for the innovative ones, it is a core element of what they could be facilitating more actively, because I think it is harder than a lot of people realize, even for two relatively early stage brands to collaborate. But you know, we've seen, I think, something like Papier, they've done quite a lot of collaborations. I guess it's easier when you're producing, you know, goods that really you create newness on a, you know, monthly basis, regular basis. And I guess that's the balance for most of the brands that we work with is, do you want to just retain your curated and very tailored collection, and how do collaborations fit in with that? And often they fit in well, because you can say, actually, you know, it's a limited run and there's 1,000 of them, and when they're gone, they're gone. And you know, consumers do still resonate with that as long as there's a purpose behind it. So yeah, I think we'll see more of it, but hopefully in a considered fashion.
I totally agree. We definitely have way too much consumption right now. So yeah, so we need to kind of make it more meaningful and more symbolic, and through that, obviously better for the environment. So a couple of last questions. The first one, your favorite brands?
So I think for me, me, I guess, sort of true heritage brands, I guess things like Barbour have a real place for me. I think something like that, or Doc Martens, look at the journey that they've been on over the last, multiple decades. I think it's amazing that they've managed to resonate from what was historically a very old customer base to really translate that to something that Gen Z resonate with. I read an article actually on North Face the other day that, their expansion outside of the mountainside and how they think about kind of hyper engaged but tiny niche communities within what they're building, and actually they've built out separate Instagram channels for every single one. And although that sounds counter to anything kind of a large corporate could achieve, I think it's just fascinating to see truly what the innovators are doing at the top. Obviously on the smaller side, I love a lot of the kind of sustainable beauty brands coming through, whether that be, we saw one out of Canada, which is in kind of water-free shampoo, so you're not paying to ship water around the world, which is much more efficient. Something like Forgo out of Sweden, which is again the same but for hand wash. I think there's a fascinating wave of that consumerism coming through, which again comes to the sustainability piece, but also beautiful Swedish minimalist aesthetic, which appeals to me personally.
That's amazing. I need to check them out, definitely. That sounds very yummy, what you just told me about. Now, and last but not least, 3 tips for any brands that are looking for VC investment.
Yeah, so I think for me, I guess first and foremost, it's do your research, understand if it's the right channel for you as an entrepreneur, for the business that you're building. Is the market fit, I guess, to take investment to supercharge your growth? And I think the more that you can do to understand that, then the best place you'll be in to get investment. And then following on from that, research your investors, understand what sort of investment partner you want. Some will be hands-on, some will be hands-off. Different things work for different people, but realistically, I think, narrow down the great investor base that exists here in the UK to less than 20 businesses that you really believe could be the best fit for your business at the stage of life that it's at, because you exponentially increase your chance of success at that point. And then it's, be creative when you're speaking to people, understand how they might be beneficial to growing your business. I'm continually amazed at the entrepreneurs that manage to extract value from a conversation in the coffee shop, once we can go back there, all the way through to, their great aunt's cousin. Yeah, I guess it's about being resourceful, not just within the 4 walls of your day-to-day job, but across the piece. And yeah, finally, I think it's just, really do something that you're passionate about and that you think that you can work in for the next 10 to 20 years, because there's very little way to short circuit that timeline from what I can see. So yeah, you'll be doing it for a long time, and you'll be with your investment partners for a long time. So as much as everyone refers to it like dating, it probably is not dissimilar to a marriage. So from that side of things, yeah, pick your investors wisely.
I love it. Investment is marriage. So this is a perfect sentence to finish on. Thank you so much, Claire, for sharing your wisdoms. It's amazing what you shared with us. It's wonderful to see an investment company really kind of focus on a holistic health of the brands and the business, not just what we stereotypically can understand as an investment that's focusing on finances. I loved all the insights that you shared with us. Thank you so much. It was honestly amazing to have you over here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kate. Take care.